Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called The Saintess Returns to the Emperor Part 1. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! This story begins with what seems to be the titular characters standing side by side. Both yet to be named, the man with regal attire and blonde hair puts his hands around the woman's shoulder, reassuring her that he can take care of everything. The woman, with flowing red hair and a thin veil over her head, looks at him with worried eyes. It seems that the two are in an appraisal process concerning the girl. A man comes forward in order to announce that Riela Brunette, the female lead, is indeed a descendant of Antou, and a more than likely candidate for a High Protector, the highest form of a Saintess. This sends the crowd that gathered for the appraisal into a frenzy. Some try to praise their god for this blessing that arrived. Some try to say that this blessing belongs to the temple, and many try to buy Riela with clamors about gold and riches. Another man steps forward from the mass of people, confidently reminding the rest of the Continental Alliance agreement, wherein every member of the alliance is to co-own a High Protector. But before the man could finish his claim, a sword swung by the man standing with Riela finds his neck. The crowd panics as the killer calls them out for their use of a useless treaty, and for seeing Riela as an object. It is then revealed that he's royalty after being scolded by the priest in the central temple. Confident of his claim in his empire, Heron Linhart von Wielsbach announces that Riela is his alone. He sends a warning to all who'd come for Riela and holds her in his arms. The familiar feeling of his touch makes Riela reminisce about their first encounter. Back then, Riela was part of an encamping batch of mercenaries. She was busy that day picking out a beautiful dress for her beloved Fabian, and in doing so, mildly annoying her companions Hank, who took her in, and Carl. Apparently, Fabian had promised her that they'll marry after this job, having earned enough to do so. As soon as the client carriage arrived, everyone got into place. Excitedly, Riela approaches the carriage and sees Fabian for the first time. Although, the mood shifts when their client makes her appearance. It's Princess Greta. She wonders why Fabian had said that they're only close friends, and marvels at how he and the princess seem close too. Nonetheless, her doubts were dispelled when Fabian came back and gave her a Vivian rose as per his promise. This was all for naught though, when during dinner it heavily implied that the princess and Fabian are more than close. Riela wonders if she should share Fabian's promise to marry her, but his cough was enough to tell her no. As the party got on, Fabian and the princess disappeared, and fearing for the worst, Riela follows them to find the two kissing. Fabian was shocked, but the princess smiled maliciously before leaving the two to talk. It's revealed that everyone knew of Fabian and the princess's engagement and chastised Riela for creating a scene. Later on, a drunk Heron observes Riela aimlessly walking while crying near the water. He hears her jump, trying to drown herself, and thinks it isn't his business. But he does save her, believing he's the only one allowed to suffer in this life. Heron rows from the waters with Riela in tow. He says she's still breathing and asks for a blanket from the crowd, but no one even moved. It seems that they're wary of Riela because they don't know her. However, a man came forward from the crowd claiming to be Riela's brother. He expresses gratitude towards Heron and rushes to Riela's side. As he did so, Heron's hand brushed with his and he could hear his malicious thoughts. It seems Heron has a peculiar magical ability. Anyhow, using this ability, he now knows that the man is lying, and what's more, is planning to kidnap and sell Riela to a brothel. Naturally, Heron calls his bluff, asking what Riela's true name is, though he doesn't know himself. The kidnapper fails Heron's test, and the people are realizing he isn't the victim's brother. Heron uses the commotion and his knowledge of the kidnapper's true intent to threaten him, thus scaring him away. And then, all Heron could think about is how Ashion is going to be shocked by what he's done. Who's Ashion? Anyway, Heron's next move is to go to an inn. He drops a pouch of gold in front of the innkeeper, who initially didn't recognize. But when he did, he complied with Heron's request for extra clothes and no more customers near their room. Heron still questions his actions, though, as Riela wakes up slightly. She asks him not to go because she's afraid of being alone, but when she touches Heron's hand, calling out Fabian's name, visions of her life with Fabian flood in, shocking Heron. He questions whether or not she's a witch, but she falls asleep again. Heron admits he's never seen such vivid hallucinations. In the morning, Riela awakes, though she's shocked why she's still alive and warm after what she did. She sees Heron asleep, but she leaves nonetheless, unsure whether to thank him or be angry for saving her. Months pass, and Riela finds herself somewhat happy working in a pub in the southern valley of the Riyota kingdom. Her peace is broken, however, when soldiers come looking for her, arresting her for an attempted assassination of the emperor. Her mind immediately goes to Fabian and her mercenary family, and her doubts creep in once again. She longs for Fabian to save her, but she learns while in the dungeon that the people who accused her have been given their rewards and were set free. Anyhow, Princess Greta and her father of the Riyota kingdom welcome the young emperor of Elshuvik, Heron. It seems the two are plotting something, but Heron cares not for their pleasantries, particularly Greta. He asks for whatever it is they are to give him, and Greta has Riela dragged to them from the dungeons. Greta's father is wary that Heron will kill the prisoner in front of the crowd, but that's what Greta wants. Heron draws his sword, but his eyes widen as he recognizes Riela, who was welcoming her end that she longs for. The emperor asks Riela to raise her head. He repeats his order in a menacing way when she doesn't respond, much to the crowd's murmurs. It is said that Heron disappeared for 10 years as the crown prince, only coming back to succeed the throne peacefully, but many know his peaceful ascent was through a bloodbath. So that's why many expect the emperor to behead a prisoner. However, Heron only mentions how skinny Riela is, to the dismay of the crowd, and to Greta too, questioning why he's showing care to a prisoner. Fearful of the changed mood, she had someone state the report on Riela's crime. But before he could finish, Heron swings his sword to cut the papers he's holding, saying he had asked Riela, not him. Greta's worry intensifies, wondering if the emperor had found out her plot. But just then, Riela faints. While Greta continues thinking about whether Heron knows of her plan, the emperor himself approaches Riela and picks her up tenderly. Afterwards, it's revealed that Ashion and Heron did have a formal plan to take the investigation for themselves, but Heron decided to hold the would-be assassin himself, which is what Ashion is scolding him for. Ashion is the emperor's friend and captain of his guard. Heron calmly says that it's the royal family of the Riyota kingdom that's itching to finish this investigation, and Ashion had to agree that he did succeed in making them panic. He's caught off guard, though, when Heron asks about Riela. Ashion himself knows that the plot isn't really true, and when Heron learns that she's at the medical ward, he orders Ashion to stay with her, even sleep and eat in the same room as her, and a horrified Ashion reluctantly agrees. Meanwhile, a guard reports to Greta that an investigator from the emperor is staying with the prisoner, so they can't get rid of her discreetly. Although Greta denies ever giving such an order. She starts biting her fingers, anxious if she had been found out despite taking care of the witnesses, and reminisces about Fabian. Back to Riela, the emperor's men discover that she's still unresponsive despite waking up. Ashion and Sir Carnell discuss what to do, but even threatening or persuading her doesn't work. Heron mentions how he can't believe she doesn't recognize him. Although he plays it off as him believing himself handsome, Ashion wonders if Heron and Riela had met before. With that logic, Heron says he's going to see the prisoner for the supposed first time. On his way there, he notices that even the medical staff participate in rumors too. Still, he calls Riela out, saying that there's no excuse to not recognize him. She still doesn't answer, so he raises her chin, putting their faces close. Heron brushes his thumb on Riela's lips and tastes the substance there. His face tightens when he recognizes it and figures out the Riyota royal family's cheap trick. But what must that be? The emperor can be seen with a stern face after his visit with the prisoner, which becomes the topic of gossip for most. Suddenly, he calls Chamberlain to arrange a banquet for the king and the princess. Though Chamberlain sees this as a positive move, Heron confides in Ashion alone that he knows Riela had been poisoned with clarity toxins, something they're familiar with since they've captured some captives with the same symptoms before. During their banquet, the king, Greta's father, is so honored and pleased with the invitation. But while he and Heron exchange pleasantries, Greta wonders why the emperor called for them when he had ignored their own invitations. She also thinks how maybe he had given up about Riela since Heron hadn't mentioned it during the meal. But when the two lock eyes, Greta feels Heron's gaze, making her cough up her drink. Her distress is the perfect excuse for Heron to call for tea to be given to her. Greta feels uplifted upon sipping it, making her father want one too, and Heron reveals it's made using the clarity toxin. Greta lurches with disgust, much to her father's dismay. Entirely oblivious, while Heron explains how the toxin works, the king fails to realize that the emperor had figured out Greta's ploy and that he's known from the beginning. As such, Heron stands and proposes to end the matter on Riela immediately, as both rulers are now present. The king thought he'd kill Riela. Instead, Heron asks that Riela's life become his kingdom's responsibility. He even mockingly asks Greta if she's okay with the proposition. Wow, Heron's intelligence is a breath of fresh air of these types of characters. Meanwhile, all Greta could think of is what could be so special about Riela. On top of Heron's unexplained interest in her, Fabian had even begged for Riela's life, though she lied to him about her safety too. Nonetheless, since Heron essentially caught her in a checkmate, Greta had to agree. Still, she swears revenge for her humiliation. Heron and his men talk about Riela's condition. It seems that the poor girl had been fed poison regularly during her imprisonment. They have an antidote, but Ashion claims responsibility for the woman's current state. He's the one who ordered no outsiders, making the Riyota's royal healer the only one who could have administered the poison. Heron disregards this, knowing clarity is difficult to detect. Probably the suspects didn't expect that they would have figured them out. Clarity in large doses could kill too, so they were planning on ending Riela's life too. Heron's face turned somber upon hearing this. He also remembers their first meeting where she would have died if not for him. And unlike him, she had stayed in that depressed, unfortunate state in life. He notes how she's still tormented and reaches for her face. But he stops himself and orders that Riela's health is to be top priority for his people, no matter how long it takes. Ashion falls silent from the Emperor's orders. As soon as they leave, he could no longer resist to ask whether his friend Heron had something already with Riela that he doesn't know about. He bases all this from Heron's apparent care for a prisoner. He even teases him about it. Heron could only grin at his friend's intuitiveness. Still, he chooses to change the subject to his increasingly recurring headaches, accompanied with voices in his head, making Ashion worry and forget about his inquiries. Heron laughs as he gets his desired reaction from his trusted confidant. Meanwhile, Riela dreams of Fabian again from when they were kids, right up to his betrayal for Princess Greta. She pleads with him to stay and never leave her, but it's all for naught. She remembers Heron's face and asks Fabian to save her before waking up. A doctor notices her and warns her of the poison's waning effects, but Riela jumps out of the bed, trying to muster some words. She dashes for the table, falling as she does so, while the people scramble over her. She reached for some pen and paper, but before the others around her could stop her, she had written something, and Heron had entered the room. The Emperor's men give him her note, and Heron reads it. It is Riela's plea to be saved. Heron bluntly asks why he should do so, saying that although they know Riela had been framed, they don't know if she's truly innocent. He asks why he should help her, and Riela could only think of her answer. And so, he changes his question to whether she'll run away again if he'll help her. This time, Riela turns to face him, and through his eyes, she finds his arrogance from earlier was merely because he despised her for not recognizing him. He asks how she'll pay him back for all the help he's given. Smiling, Heron says he'll wait for her answer when she's better and asks Bill and Carnell to care for her. Meanwhile, the Riyota kingdom is busy with the rumors of Heron apparently falling in love with the prisoner. No one is allowed into the castle's wing where the Emperor and his men reside. They've even heard that Heron's agent visited a seamstress to have dresses made from the finest material to be made. Greta overhears this, and her maid asks if she'd like to go back into the castle. However, a spiteful Greta replies that she'll face the one who ruined her sacred, precious castle. Ashion reveals that the rumors concerning Heron and Riela are quickly picking up steam. Some say that the Emperor is a romantic, and some suggest that it's a whirlwind love between an assassin and her target. Heron sees the funny side of this and laughs, but Ashion is genuinely concerned and scolds his Emperor because of it. Still, Heron doesn't see the serious side of this discussion, nor does he care. And so Ashion is left with one option, to ask the woman herself. However, he finds talking with Riela too difficult, for the opposite reason. It seems that she's a tattletale, and Ashion is the one answering questions instead of asking them. Finally, he stops her, wondering how someone so silent from earlier became so talkative. In fact, Ashion thinks that while Heron is stonewalling him, Riela is feather-brained, and so he drops it entirely. Meanwhile, Riela finds herself recovering more and more. However, she feels anxious. She wonders why she receives such good treatment in medicine, food, and even clothes. She even knows that's what the others think too. Riela then thinks of the Emperor's intentions. Wanting to at least know where he is, Riela walks alone in the hallway until eventually finding herself in the presence of the Emperor. They make eye contact, but Heron looks away after a moment, leaving Riela thinking she's indecisive in greeting him formally. However, he asks her to sit with him, even asking her to sit closer when she sits farther away. While she wonders what to do, he asks if she had anything to say to him. Finally, she asks him what he wants, in a sense that she'll act as a maid and get it. When asked what she meant, Riela says she doesn't have an answer yet to Heron's questions on how she'll pay him back, seeing as he has everything now. She makes a point of being a political weapon against the royal family of the Riyota kingdom, and although it's partly true, Heron detests her perception of being fine treated as an object. He wonders why he's so upset and says he doesn't necessarily need her testimony, and rather, he didn't take her in for her help. Unfortunately, Riela takes this the wrong way, as if she's not good enough for him to even use as an object. Which is exactly why Heron's irritated. She starts feeling like she overstepped and asks forgiveness for even offering her help. Heron, on the other hand, is so upset that Riela feels defeated in life, wondering what made her become that way that he leaves abruptly. He's genuinely concerned, but it came out wrong. Anyway, Ashion sees Heron in his room after escorting Riela. The Emperor asks for his hand, wanting to read his thoughts. Ashion, even in his mind, is still scolding his friend. Ashion asks why Heron didn't just use his powers on Riela, and the latter reveals that his special powers born to him doesn't work on her. This leaves Heron wondering why he's frustrated when he can't do so to Riela. Riela lies in her bed, wallowing in self-pity. She thinks to herself that she expected that kind of treatment. After all, Fabian had found her family had abandoned her easily. She sees no reason why the Emperor of the Elshevike would be nice to her. But he is, so she's determined to do something for him too. The next night, she finds herself searching for him. She's met by the guards to his quarters, which do not let her in with authority. Riela tries to argue, but turns out she didn't need to, as Ashion would intervene in her stead, basing his actions on Heron and Riela's interaction from yesterday. Is this Ashion with the Best Wingman Award? Anyway, he tells Riela to look for the Emperor in his study, and she does just that. He doesn't answer, though, leading her to think he doesn't want her there, but when she looks through the crack of the door, she finds Heron collapsed on the floor. She tries calling for help, but her voice couldn't reach the outside since it's still weak from recovery. And so Riela decides that she'll do what she can, and that's staying by Heron's side. She knows the feeling of loneliness, and she doesn't want him to suffer the things she did. Riela holds the Emperor's hand as she promises she'll get help. The Emperor wakes up and holds her close, but the guards burst in, thinking Riela did something. Thankfully, Heron sets the record straight. He's then made to rest, and Riela learns that he's prone to seizures, and that's as a side effect of his powers. But when Ashion learns that Riela held Heron's hand during his attack, he becomes frantic. Oh, what could this mean? After hearing that Riela touches Heron's hands, Ashion angrily grabs her hand and scolds her for doing such a thing. Heron quickly tries to stop Ashion, but he does not follow him. Instead, Ashion proceeds to tell them that they cannot ignore Riela's reaction, and that they must know precisely what happened to get a proper diagnosis. Heron then glares at Ashion and tells him that he's blaming the wrong people, and that he must snap out of it. After hearing Heron's cold voice, Ashion quickly asks Riela for forgiveness for overreacting. Riela then shockingly replies that it's okay. After seeing Ashion's worried expression, Riela realizes that she must have made Heron's condition worse, and also finds out about Heron having seizures. Drawing Riela's attention, Heron sternly instructs her that she witnessed and saw today. She quickly agrees with him. As she leaves the room, she becomes aware of her desire to relieve Heron's pain and to be more than just a helpful instrument. Later on, while alone in his room, Heron remembers the incident and how her voice sounded like sunlight breaking through a terrible fog. He remembers how warm it was, enough to drive out the pain. An angel is what he thought of her at that moment. The following morning, the servants rush to Riela's bed and tug her up, screaming for her to get dressed immediately. She tries to explain to them that there might be a misunderstanding while being dressed in an elegant gown by the servants, but she is interrupted when someone announces Heron's arrival. Upon arriving in front of her, Heron tells her that she can ask him anything she likes to know. Riela then takes the chance to ask him if he's feeling better. After hearing her questions, Heron looks disappointed, which makes him panic, thinking that she might have said something to offend him. Girl, he is just expecting something more. Heron approaches Riela more closely and tries to ask her again if she has any more questions regarding the topics she's interested in. She then remembers that he promised her that he would find time to talk to her last time. She then grabs this chance and asks Heron if she ever caused him more trouble because of yesterday's incident. While Heron is still shocked by her questions, Riela, looking crestfallen, tells him that what Ashion said yesterday still bothers her. She thinks that maybe things went wrong because she touched his hands. Seeing how worried Riela is, Heron tells her that he is perfectly fine and that there is nothing she should worry about. He also adds that she, in fact, helped him yesterday. This makes Riela's heart beat loudly. Heron then asks Riela why she holds his hand, since even if he is the Emperor, she is not required to comfort him. She answers that she also doesn't know the reason for her actions. He then proceeds to walk around the room, looking at the barricaded windows. He asks her when she last saw the sun. She tries to answer in her usual apologetic manner, but he leaves her room not a moment later. Not long after, a maid runs towards her and informs her that Heron orders her to get ready for an outing. Oh, Heron is starting to really care for Riela. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Greta and her father are panicking because of their failed plan to kill Heron. Both begin to worry since they tried to make an appointment with the Emperor after the incident but are consistently declined. Greta is losing her mind because Heron blatantly ignores their request even if he resides in their kingdom. Still, she is torn if she will continue to bug him since Greta knows that she can't anger him further after what happened at the banquet. Greta's father begins to panic and tells her that they need to apologize and offer compensation before Heron does something worse to them. She then angrily reminds him that there is no compensation that they can provide for attempting to assassinate the Emperor. Her father then points out that Heron was not the Emperor before the incident, thus there might be a chance that he'll be more lenient with them. Greta again tells her father that it's a stupid plan. Hearing this, her father starts to blame her for hiring a lowly mercenary and does not listen to him when he recommends hiring a skilled assassin. She then angrily defends Fabian against her father and reminds him that Fabian saved him when he was given the order to eliminate Heron. She also reasons that their plan was supposed to be solid if the first hired man at the black market did not back out in the first place. Greta really pisses me off. Like, wake up, girl! Greta then furiously moves closer to her father and shouts at him, insisting that Fabian is living in the shadows because of them, even if he is not someone who should be living away from the light. She also insultingly tells her father that while Fabian is doing everything, he hides in the back of the room, trembling and still a coward while waiting to be saved again. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Riela is ushered to the garden where Heron awaits her. While walking toward him, she realizes it is her first time seeing the sun since the failed assassination plan towards him. She also admits that ever since she arrived at the palace, spring has always been a season of pain, darkness, and fear for her. When she arrives at the pavilion, Heron extends his hand to her but stops when he sees the chain in her hands. He then scolds the guard for thinking that he looks like an emperor who's pathetic enough to be overtaken by a woman who doesn't even have any weapon, and then glares at the guard while commanding him to unchain her. Afterward, while they're walking, Riela thanked Heron for letting her walk in the sun. While she is still talking, he holds her hand and tells her that he doesn't usually ask questions, but she is an exception. Right on cue, his romantic bones are indeed coming through. While holding Riela's hands, Heron can't read her mind and wonders what she must be thinking behind those red eyes, which makes him more curious about her than ever. While Riela and Heron are walking, Greta suddenly arrives at the gardens and calls his attention. Greta is surprised to see them both and tells him about their request to have an audience with him, but she doesn't get an answer. The Emperor, who is obviously not pleased with her arrival, then tells her that the matter to be discussed must be urgent since she even trampled the flowers just to quickly get to them. Greta still does not back down and continues to sweet-talk Heron by telling him that she is willing to walk over any grounds just to see him. Hearing this, Heron quickly tells her he will immediately set up a meeting. Greta then acts surprised to see Riela and then starts to point out that she doesn't acknowledge her presence anymore. Switching tactics, she tells Heron that her visit is because she wants to talk to Riela. Heron then feels Riela shaking because of Greta's presence, thus he gently squeezes her hand. Because of his actions, she looks up to him and tells him she's all right. She then notices that he seems angrier than her, but even so, she still feels his warmth, which brings her comfort because she knows that she will immediately collapse without it. Thus, Riela bravely looks directly at Greta and replies that she also has something she has wanted to tell her. The next day, the two women meet each other. While Greta is waiting in the garden for Riela to come, one of the maids tells her that Riela should be grateful that she is still alive, and that Riela is shameless because of the way she talked to Greta last meeting. When Riela arrives at the garden, Greta then acts happy to see her again. She then instructs everyone to leave since she wants to talk to Riela alone. Already alone, Greta begins to shed tears while telling Riela that it has been a long time since they talked. She then starts to tell her that she is sorry and that she feels so guilty about the incident. She then tries to guilt-trip Riela by asking if Riela resents her. Hearing this, Riela already knows that this will happen since before meeting Greta, she already talked with Heron and Ashion. They informed her that they already knew that Riela was innocent and that they were already in the process of preparing official international complaints against the Riyota family. While Greta continues her guilt trip, she asks Riela that although she deserves to be punished, does she also think Fabian deserves any punishment? Riela then coldly replies that she doesn't want to talk about Fabian and also tells her that she doesn't care if Fabian dies. Go girl, get that revenge! Still shocked by Riela's statement, the princess asks Riela if she truly doesn't care about Fabian anymore. When Riela is about to answer, Heron appears behind her and leans on the table, repeating that Riela said she doesn't care. Shocked by Heron's sudden appearance, Greta tries to talk calmly, asking about what brings him into the garden. He then informs her that their conversation is dragging on too long, and that he remembers that there is something he needs to bring into the garden. He reveals a handkerchief, saying that he figures that at least one of them would end up crying. After hearing this, Greta exaggerately sobs while thinking that the handkerchief is for her, thinking that Heron might just be infatuated with Riela but will prioritize her since she is a princess. Delulu moment, ladies and gentlemen. But her hope is then crushed when Heron gives it to Riela, telling her that he will gladly do so if she wants him to stay by her side. Riela smiles at Heron and tells Greta that she accepts her apology, but she will pretend that she didn't hear her other statements. She then proceeds to leave with Heron. Upon arriving at Riela's room, she asks Heron if he will question her about her talk with Greta, but he tells her that it's okay before taking his leave. Lying in her bed, Riela remembers Fabian and starts to remind herself not to feel guilty because it is his fault that she is in this situation after all. She then questions herself about why she has ever loved somebody like Fabian before while beginning to fall asleep. Yes, girl, your past choice of men is questionable. After a few minutes, Riela realizes that she slept the whole day, thus she instantly walks to Heron's room. Upon arriving in his room, she is welcomed by a handsome Heron who is getting ready by the servants. Noticing her arrival, he then asks her if she needs to talk to him urgently, but she quickly tells him it's not urgent. Hearing this, Heron then tells Riela that they can talk later at dinner tonight, but his secretaries pause after hearing this because he has a lot of things planned later. Still not minding his secretaries opposing his plan, Heron moves closer to Riela and then wishes that she can tell him anything she wants during dinner time and that she needs to nap until then to look more rested. Because of his sudden flirty actions, Riela can't stop blushing. Oh, Heron, you flirty bastard! While Heron is on his way to visit Greta, Ashion asks him if he needs to read Greta's memories, even if he said earlier that they had already finished the investigation, and reading her mind can't be used as evidence. However, he disagrees since he wants to know everything and he can't just ask her directly. Hearing this, Ashion then curiously asks Heron if there's a big possibility that he developed feelings for Riela, just like the rumors are saying. He then looks at Ashion and smiles, telling him that perhaps the rumors are true. This new information makes Ashion happy. This guy sure does not waste time. Upon arriving at Greta's place, Heron and Ashion are greeted by Greta curiously, telling him she is surprised to see him twice a day. Heron then reaches for her hand and leans to kiss it to greet her. Next in the room, Heron commands the maid to open the gifts he brings for the Riyota family. Greta then feels overwhelmed by how expensive the jewelry is, but controls herself while asking him the reason for all the gifts. She knows he should be demanding that she give up the kingdom and apologize to him, but instead, it's the other way around. Heron then explains to Greta that he was planning on giving these gifts to the Riyota family since someone close to him made her cry. After hearing this, Greta instantly knows that someone close to him is Riela, and concludes that Riela might be vital to him and is willing to take care of the situation. Heron then continues to tell Greta that the gifts are proof to show off to the nobles that their families are on good terms. Hearing this, Greta agrees and accepts his help wearing the necklace. Upon wearing the necklace, Heron touches Greta's shoulders, allowing him to read her memories. Heron then sees that scene in the past where Greta was seducing Fabian and making Fabian choose her instead of Riela. He also sees Fabian crying while rejecting Greta since Fabian likes Riela more than Greta. Lastly, Heron sees the scene where Greta tells Riela to just take her own life since she is dragging Fabian down. Greta is pathetic, and so is Fabian. They deserve each other. After learning these things, Heron realizes that this might be the reason why Riela tried to drown herself in the river. After the meeting, while walking home, Ashion notices how quiet Heron is, thus making him slightly panic, and tells him that reading Greta's memories is a bad idea since it might give him seizures again. But he shrugs it off and tells Ashion that he is okay. While still walking, Heron suddenly remembers that Riela is waiting for him at the dining hall. Thus, he instructs him to quickly run to Riela and inform her that he is on his way. But he stops after seeing Riela waiting for him outside the door. Noticing that Heron did not use an umbrella even if it was raining, Riela then rushes towards him and worriedly tells him that he needs to get out of the rain and go inside. Seeing that he did not move and was still staring at her, she quickly raised her arms and slightly covered his head. Witnessing Riela's actions, Heron then notices that she is worried about him, even though she's getting wet and shivering more than him from the cold. He then hugs her while thinking about how she can act like she is willing to give him everything. This guy is falling with no savior in sight. Heron then tells Riela that he wants her to worry about him more and will listen to her concerns. She then asks him if he completed his business for the day. He answers that he did while moving his face closer to her. Noticing that their faces are closer to each other, Riela quickly looks away. How cute! Heron then continues to tell Riela that it is his turn to ask her. He then asks her if anything causes her pain. Hearing how concerned he is, she realizes that his words hit her heart and that everything hurts when she was looking at Greta and hearing Fabian's name from her. She also learns that since Heron understands her pain, it is enough for her, thus making her look at him while smiling and telling him that the pain is now bearable. He is more than relieved to hear this. Afterward, Heron instructs Ashion to prepare 2 meals and bring them to his room immediately. He also instructs him to prepare a warm bath in his bedroom since they must wash up before dinner. Riela then tries to excuse herself but is stopped when Heron also instructs Ashion to escort Riela to his bathroom. OMG, Heron, LOL. After hearing this, all the servants, including Riela and Ashion, are scandalized by Heron's instructions, but they obey him without question. While in the bathroom, Riela is enjoying the warm bath. The servants ask her again if she needs help washing up, but she refuses and tells them she's okay. Hearing footsteps again, she is about to refuse the servants, only to find out that Heron is walking closer to her while explaining that he requested her to take a bath in his room, since it's the only place with continuous warm water at this hour. After the bath, while they eat, Heron teases Riela again and requests her to sleep in his room for the night. Riela, still shocked, begins to tell him that she is not expecting such a thing, but Heron tells her that he wants her to sleep in his bedroom tonight. This guy, he sure does move fast. Noticing that Riela's face is so red, Heron stops teasing her and explains that while she sleeps in his room, he'll be having a meeting that will last all night. Oh! He still smiles after seeing her reaction. Meanwhile, in the office, Ashion and the other servants are talking about Riela spending the night in Heron's bed. One man asks Ashion if the rumors about the Emperor's relations are valid. Ashion replies that they are correct, but also tells them that Riela's and Heron's relationship is a little complicated, since there's something more that they do not know about. Ashion, gossiping with the other servants, is quickly cut off when Heron appears, discreetly threatening him by asking if he still remembers what will happen to an aide who spreads stories about the Emperor. Logically, this shuts Ashion up quickly. Seeing that the aides are all present, Heron tells them to gather at the table since they need something to go over. Noticing his seriousness while talking, Ashion instantly knows they'll be working late. Settling in their respective seats, Heron asks him what verdict they expect against the Riyota family after the complaint was filed. The aides then inform him that they will either be exiled or confined to a temple, since the incident happened before he became the emperor. Hearing this, Heron confirms that executing them is out of the verdict, thus making them feel unsatisfied about the predicted outcome. He then informs his aides that they will proceed to their second plan. The next day, Riela wakes up in Heron's room and is welcomed by a maid who brings her breakfast in bed, which Heron had previously instructed them to do. While eating, Riela wonders why Heron is doing all of these things for her. But her wandering thoughts are cut off when the maid informs her that she must get ready after breakfast since she has a meeting in the afternoon. Later that day, Heron returns to the Riyota mansion. He then hands Greta and her father a contract stating that he will overlook the past incident for the stability of his nation and the peace of the Riyota kingdom. However, he briefly explains that he is not doing it because he likes Greta or her father. Next, Greta is also handed a contract stating she will pay Riela 10 million euros every month, ask for Riela's apology in front of everyone, and must protect Riela for the rest of her life, which Greta strongly disagrees with. Riela then arrives at the scene and witnesses how Greta's father forces Greta, shouting at his daughter to apologize and stop being prideful. Greta is forced by her father to kneel and beg for Riela's forgiveness, vowing they will never trouble her again. Afterward, His Majesty advises Riela to rest. As Riela walks down the hallway, tears slip down her cheeks as she wonders how everything could end with just an apology. Ashion suddenly appears, speculating that His Majesty changed his mind because of her. He mentions that her safety is now part of the peace treaty, leaving Riela shocked. She asks why His Majesty would do this, and Ashion vaguely replies that as a woman, she is fatal, though his words are unclear. He reassures her that she shouldn't feel like an inconvenience, noting Heron has already faced accusations due to the rebellion. While they are talking, Greta walks by, glaring at Riela. She looks at Greta before rushing past without a word. Poor misguided girl. Remember the treaty or you'll pay the price. Ashion then excuses himself, mentioning he'll be busy with preparations for their departure, as the treaty has been signed and they shall return to their palace. He then advises Riela to take care of herself. After they leave, Riela finds Heron's handkerchief and recalls the time he let her sleep in his room. Though embarrassed, she enjoyed the luxurious life and felt relieved, thinking she had been compensated enough to not have to work again. However, after everything seemed to go well, she felt frustrated by the Emperor's departure and cried. Riela comes back to her senses when Heron calls her, praising her efforts, but she doesn't turn around, not wanting to be seen crying. Instead, she says she's indebted to him. He brushes it off with a joke about her coveting his bathroom, which she's welcome to use. Heron hands her the signed treaty and advises her to be careful with it. When he asks about her plans, she mentions returning to Garland. He confirms it's the village she stayed in and advises her to be cautious on her journey. For 3 days, Heron's schedule is hectic as he distributes gifts to everyone, from servants to nobles. The people talk about how expectant they were about his return after such a long absence. The king also visits Heron nightly to offer tribute and discuss the friendship between their nations. They also mention Greta, who has fallen ill, but her family is too busy with farewell preparations to care. Meanwhile, Heron gives Riela gifts, which she tries to return, but he insists she keep them. She ends up giving them to those who helped her, except for a handkerchief she keeps, believing it holds her feelings. How is she carrying so much emotion in just a small piece of fabric? Later, she decides to return it and asks the butler where the Emperor is. He tells her he's in the main hall for the farewell party, making her think he can't wait to leave. Feeling unsettled, she strolls through the garden, reminiscing about the time she walked there with the Emperor. Lost in thought, she hears a familiar voice, a voice she fell in love with, calling out to her. When Riela turns around, she's surprised to see Fabian. Emotions well up as she wonders why he's there. Uncertainty grips her, making her hesitate, unsure how to react to his unexpected presence. Meanwhile, Greta, anxious and worried that someone might have encountered her by now, reassures herself that her plans from the previous night aren't in vain, hoping they will still unfold as intended. Wait, is this Fabian and Riela she was thinking about? What's her plan now? This girl can't seem to stay out of trouble. Even though it was late last night, Greta visited Fabian. She informed him that he was now free from all the charges he faced. Fabian then asked about Riela's well-being, which angered her. However, she maintained her composure and told him that Riela was safe. Greta immediately thought of a plan and arranged for him to meet Riela. She couldn't bear to see the man she loved with Riela, so she resolved to destroy her spirit if she couldn't take her life. You can't make the Emperor fall in love with you, Greta, not in your wildest dreams. On the other hand, Fabian, with teary eyes, asks Riela if she's all right and begs her not to run away. But she feels nothing and wonders why he's crying. He insists he's been searching for her and thinks of her daily, but this only angers her, making her feel like everyone has used her as a shield. Riela accuses Fabian of being with Greta, who she believes tried to kill her under the pretense of protecting him. He is shocked by this and can't believe Greta's actions, which further infuriates Riela. She can't accept that she once trusted Greta and feels betrayed by Fabian, the man she loved. Despite her anger, Fabian still asks if she's all right and expresses how much he misses her. Riela, overwhelmed, tears up and tells him that if he truly misses her, he should be by her side instead of with the princess. Meanwhile, Heron, with Ashion, shows off the leather belt from Riela, claiming it as his since the leather bag was a gift he gave her. Ashion, incredulous, refuses to give it to His Majesty. The Emperor insists on taking the belt by force. When His Majesty gets the belt, Ashion exclaims that he should take Riela with him also. He elaborates that they should take her to the Empire, which he concludes that the Emperor also wants. He says that everyone gives gifts to everyone except for the Emperor for a farewell gift. Heron concludes that she's just comfortable with him, but Ashion thinks it's because she's not ready to let him go. Ashion advises that if Heron doesn't want to let her go, he should consider an option or backup plan. Reflecting on Riela's hardships, His Majesty realizes he doesn't want to be perceived as a villain. He regrets not having the courage to bring her to his land, thinking he might never see her again. And so Ashion suggests to Heron he should ask Riela first. If she doesn't want it, it's no loss to him. The Emperor decides to ask, and Ashion informs him that she is at her favorite place, a spot she visits with His Majesty from time to time. Just a moment ago, Heron wasn't particularly eager to see Riela, but now everything has changed. He walks towards where she is, only to find her with Fabian when he arrives at the garden. He calls out to her, asks what's happening, and then embraces her. What is Heron thinking? Is he finally realizing his true feelings? Seeing this, Fabian knows that it is the Emperor of Elshevike that she's hugging with. Meanwhile, Heron also notices Fabian, as he saw in the princess's memory. And then, Fabian rushes over to Heron and wrongly accuses him that he was behind what happened to Riela. Riela intervenes and stops Fabian, asking him to let go. On the other hand, Ashion, with his sword drawn and ready, asks Riela if she is acquainted with Fabian. The tension in the air escalates, and Fabian, sensing the danger, urgently pleads to let Riela go. Riela tells Heron not to listen to Fabian and apologizes on his behalf, claiming Fabian knows nothing. Heron, however, insists that she must come with him to the Empire, stating it as an order rather than a request. Despite Fabian's desperate pleas for Heron to reconsider, he's ignored. Afterwards, Heron instructs Riela to pack her belongings, but quickly remembers that she has already discarded everything he gave her, leaving her with nothing to pack. With tears in her eyes, Riela looks at Heron. That tearful gaze she gives him, it hits right in the heart. When he asks if something is wrong, she expresses her regret and lingering thoughts about Fabian, wishing she could still be with him despite his past actions. She acknowledges that things have changed, and she barely recognizes him now. Heron questions whether Riela can't stop thinking about Fabian. Surprised, she asks how he knows Fabian's name. Heron explains that he noticed her searching for Fabian when he saved her from falling into the river. He then asks if she still loves Fabian, and though he pretends not to care, he says it's fine if she doesn't want to come with him. As Heron returns to leave, Riela stops him, declaring that she no longer loves Fabian. She tells him that if he can truly take her with him, she would be pleased to go. Heron, pondering her decision, kisses her slowly, hinting at the gravity of her choice. As Heron kisses Riela, he realizes that being together is what matters most, no matter where they are. He also wonders if he could have shown her more affection. The kiss says it all. Being with Riela is what he values most. Afterward, Heron discusses his intentions of taking Riela with him with his people and Greta. However, Greta is unhappy with this. In his defense, he argues that it would be better for everyone if they can no longer see Riela. He also adds that she could have Fabian without Riela's presence, to which she reminds him that there are others listening. Heron responds that he knows what she's trying to achieve. He moves closer to her and whispers that her actions are foolish for a princess. In a fit of rage, Greta hurls a cup of tea across the room, feeling utterly defeated by the thought of losing to Riela. Her father, furious at her reckless outburst, screams at her. Greta's tantrum is just a mess, and her dad's yelling, totally deserved. She needs to get a grip. A new day dawns. It is a magnificent day in Riyota. Heron gives his farewell speech, expressing his gratitude to the people of the kingdom, but he pointedly doesn't mention the royal family. From afar, Riela stands at the edge of the crowd where Heron and the king can't see her. And then she is advised to ride the newly purchased carriage, joining Heron at the last minute. She feels inconvenienced, but since it's the Emperor's order, she has no choice. Expecting to share a carriage with Heron, she is surprised to receive a new one instead. However, she doesn't complain, knowing she owes him her life for helping her escape the kingdom of Riyota. As they leave Riyota, Riela sheds a tear and tries to stop the carriage to say goodbye, but it keeps moving, leaving her in tears. They detour to Rondel's waterfall, where Riela is awed by the beauty and overwhelmed with emotion, crying as the waterfall roars. 3 days later, they reach their third inn. Riela is escorted to her room by a woman, ordered by the Emperor. Upon hearing that it's Heron's order, she can't understand his actions, feeling he's becoming distant from her. In her room, a maid named Lou brings her meal. Riela apologizes for not fetching it herself, but Lou reassures her. Riela requests to be called by her first name instead of Lady Riela, but Lou insists on using the title. Riela doesn't like it, so she asks for the maid's name, which is Lou. She praises how beautiful Lou's name is and recognizes her accent as being from Riyota. Lou sits on the edge of Riela's bed and explains that this is her first time with the Imperial delegation, having previously worked in Riyota's storehouses. Riela misunderstands when Lou mentions the king ordered her to the Empire. However, Lou clarifies she chose to come for the high salary promised by the Emperor, which everyone needs. She adds that she is deeply grateful to the Emperor for this opportunity. As Lou tells her story about the journey to the Empire, Riela is amazed by how chatty she is. Lou then asks what Riela plans to do when she gets to the Empire, leaving her deep in thought. Riela's simple reply, saying she's curious too, leaves Lou confused. Hence, she can't help but wonder why Heron hasn't visited her lately. Maybe he's busy. But she also finds herself worrying if he's doing well. When evening comes, Riela is walking when she suddenly finds Lou curled up on the ground, writhing in pain and vomiting. Panicked, she carries Lou to the nearest clinic, pleading with the doctor to treat her. But the doctor coldly refuses, likely because Lou is just a servant in their eyes. It's infuriating to see Lou's suffering dismissed so heartlessly, just because she's a servant. When Riela attempts to lay Lou on a clinic bed, the doctor heartlessly declares that there's no room for her and suggests leaving Lou on the floor instead. Riela is shocked and shouts at the doctor in disbelief, but Lou weakly stops her. Lou insists that she's fine and urges Riela to stay calm. This only reinforces Riela's suspicion that the staff won't help Lou, even though she serves the Imperial family. Determined, Riela insists that Lou rest in her own bed, even though Lou tries to refuse. She takes charge, bringing water and medication, all while the events replay in her mind. She recalls the time when Heron was taking care of her when she was unwell. Meanwhile, Heron speaks with the coachman to ensure that everything with the carriage is in order, and the coachman assures him that it is. Heron then inquires about the guest, and after a brief hesitation, the coachman mentions Riela. When the coachman asks if Heron means the guest from room 201, Heron confirms. He then asks if she's doing well and if she had dinner before going to bed. It looks like there's a little misunderstanding brewing here. Ashion, noticing Heron's concern for Riela, wonders why, instead of spying on her, Heron doesn't simply visit her. The coachman informs Heron that Riela has taken medicine for a stomach ache and chills, which surprises Heron as he assumed it was meant for someone else. Ashion taps Heron on the shoulder and suggests that they send someone to check on Riela, or perhaps Heron should visit her himself. Ashion also offers Heron a mask to help him avoid being recognized if he's worried about being seen visiting her. Although initially hesitant, Heron quickly asks Ashion to bring him some plum wine and fresh water, known for restoring energy. Ashion fetches them, amused at seeing Heron act like a lost puppy. Afterward, Heron, now wearing a cape, visits Riela's room. He hesitates before knocking on her door, uncertain after not seeing her for several days. Doubts flood his mind. Perhaps she regrets her decision to come with him. To avoid confronting this possibility, he has been avoiding her, planning to wait until they cross the border when it would be too late for her to turn back. After a moment of hesitation, he finally enters the room. Seeing her covered with a blanket, he softly asks if she's already asleep. He then tells her that if she can't make it to the border, she should let him know. Oh boy, this is awkward. When there's no response, he decides to pull the blanket back, but she turns away from him, leaving him in shock. Seeing her trembling, he mistakenly believes it's because she finds his touch repulsive. Heron's worry deepens as he repeatedly asks if Riela is alright, but the silence is unsettling. Suddenly, a sharp voice behind him accuses him of being a thief, and before he can react, something hard strikes him. He turns around, only to find Riela holding the object. He wonders aloud who is lying in bed. The tension breaks as Lou throws off the blanket, crying and calling for Riela, clearly scared. See, Heron, you've got it all wrong. It's not Riela who's sick, it's Lou, and you've completely missed it because you haven't seen her in a while. Heron steps outside to give them space. Later, Riela explains that Lou finally calmed down and may have mistaken him for an intruder. Heron chuckles, saying he's never been beaten by a stick, not even by enemies. Riela, feeling guilty, kneels and apologizes, saying she deserves to be killed. She also explains that she overreacted because of past experiences with thieves. Heron kneels too, reassuring her that he can't harm her after trying to protect her, and apologizes for scaring them by wearing something unfamiliar. Helping her stand, he adds with a smile that he's not used to asking permission before opening doors. She laughs, acknowledging he's the Emperor. When Heron inquires about Lou, Riela thanks him for the plum wine that helped calm her. Concerned about Riela's sleeping arrangements, he suggests she stay with him instead of in the carriage. She hesitates, asking if he's taking her to his bedroom since the other rooms are occupied. But he teasingly replies that it wouldn't be their first time and warns her not to wake everyone by resisting. When they reach his room, she's confused why they don't stop. He remarks that she probably doesn't want to sleep anyway, so they might as well keep walking. He teases her that she seemed eager to sleep with him, leaving her embarrassed as she lets go of his hand and quickly walks ahead. What a mix-up! Her embarrassed reaction is priceless. While running, Riela reflects on how she hasn't seen Heron for a week, yet here she is running away with him. Heron catches up and playfully warns her that she might tire herself out, teasing that it will lead to a restful night with him. She stops and questions why he keeps teasing her, but as she does, she slips. Fortunately, Heron catches her and gently advises her to be careful and stop running away. He points out that behind her is the water she might have fallen into and drowned. He teases her about always wanting to jump into the water, though she insists it was an accident the last time. Heron reveals that this river is connected to the Leders River. Realizing she's back at the river, she's surprised as she never expected to return. He casually asks how she feels about being back, playfully wondering if she's tempted to jump in again. As she looks at him, memories flood her mind. She recalls how his cold demeanor once intimidated her, making her feel distant and wary. Over time, as they spent more moments together, she saw a different side of him and couldn't help but be drawn to his striking appearance as well as his personality. Riela declares she's done with crying and is ready to embrace a better life, thanking him for giving her a second chance. Touched by her words, Heron pulls her close and kisses her. Oh, the feels! The chemistry between them is electric, and this moment is pure romance. However, she loses her grip on his cape. Before he can hold her tight, she leans towards the cliff and falls off. What's happening with Riela? Did she just fall into the water? Later, Heron rushes back to his room, instructing Ashion to follow, though Ashion is confused. Later, they arrive at Heron's carriage, and Ashion wonders why. A moment ago, as they were walking, Ashion kept asking where they were heading, but Heron remained silent. Concerned, Ashion asks if something really happened to Riela and decides to bring Carnell along. As they stand by Heron's carriage, Ashion is still puzzled, but when he opens the carriage, he's shocked to see Riela unconscious. And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the next one!